Do you feel like your old vitality is fading day by day? Have you been told that the decline in your strength, libido, and concentration is simply an inevitable part of aging? Today, we're going to debunk that lie. The truth is, starting in your 60s, the loss of that vitality we know as testosterone isn't just a matter of time, but a daily battle we wage with what we choose to eat. And believe me, the threat to your virility often lurks in the sweetest and most unexpected place in your kitchen: fruit. I'm Dr. Elena Castillo, and throughout my career, I've seen how small nutritional adjustments can restore the energy, intimate health, and mental strength of men who had given up on their prime. I'm not here to give you fad diets or expensive supplements. I'm here to give you practical truth. I fully understand the frustration of wanting to maintain that spark, that desire to feel strong and capable, but not knowing where to start. Many of my patients, now over 70, ask me, "Doctor, why have I lost my energy and my desire?" And the answer I give them today is the same one I give you. We are unknowingly consuming foods that are silent enemies of our testosterone, the hormone that defines our strength and our manhood. In this meeting, we're going to be brutally honest and direct. I'm going to name the 4 fruits that, if you're a man over 60, you should drastically reduce or eliminate because they're sabotaging your testosterone and your intimate health, promoting insulin resistance and inflammation. But it's not all about restriction. I'll also reveal the 4 powerful fruits that act as true allies, regenerating your blood vessels, boosting your nitric oxide, and giving you back that vitality and confidence you thought was gone forever. Get ready, because the change starts with your fruit plate tomorrow. Okay, it's time to lay our cards on the table. We need to understand how these silent enemies operate at the hormonal and metabolic level. When I talk about testosterone sabotage, I'm talking about how certain foods force your body into a vicious cycle. They raise blood sugar and force your liver to process an excessive load of fructose. This has 2 devastating effects. First, it drives insulin resistance and the accumulation of visceral fat. And second, it increases the production of a protein called SHBG, sex hormone-binding globulin. This SHBG is the real thief. It acts like a policeman who takes your free, functional testosterone and locks it away, rendering it useless for building muscle, maintaining desire, or giving you energy. It's hijacked vitality. The first fruit on my caution list, which many people consume thinking it's the epitome of health, is grapes. Doctor, how is this possible? Grapes, especially the seedless and very sweet varieties we find in the supermarket, are tiny, concentrated fructose bombs. Although they contain antioxidants, their sugar content is extremely high. For a man over 60, whose metabolism no longer handles glucose as efficiently, and whose liver may already be somewhat overloaded, the regular consumption of a large bunch of grapes, or worse yet, grape juice, increases the glycemic load and saturates the liver. This fructose overload forces the liver to produce fat and, consequently, promotes insulin resistance. Remember, insulin resistance doesn't just precede type 2 diabetes. It's the direct path to low testosterone. When your body is insulin resistant, it becomes much harder to burn fat, especially that stubborn belly fat. And here comes the double whammy. That belly fat isn't inert, it's metabolically active. It converts what little free testosterone you have left into estrogen, the female hormone, through a process called aromatization. If you love grapes and eat them daily in large quantities, you're unwittingly helping your body sabotage your own virility. Drastically reduce your grape consumption. The second fruit, often consumed in large quantities for breakfast and an incredible source of concentrated sugar, is the banana or ripe plantain. Yes, bananas provide potassium, but overripe bananas transform almost all of their starch into simple sugars, primarily fructose and sucrose. A single large, very yellow banana can have the sugar content of a small chocolate bar. If you're a sedentary man, or if you already have signs of insulin resistance or are overweight, that morning sugar rush causes a glucose spike that forces your pancreas to work overtime, perpetuating the cycle of inflammation and low energy. Chronic inflammation is enemy number 1 for natural testosterone production. Consider this. The goal isn't to eliminate all fruits, but rather to select those with the lowest glycemic impact. Let's move on to the third fruit, one that causes a lot of controversy and that we consume without measure: the mango. The mango is, without a doubt, the queen of the tropics, sweet, juicy, and packed with vitamins. But, and here comes the big but for modern humans' metabolic health, a large, fully ripe mango is a concentrated sugar bomb, primarily sucrose and fructose. A single sizable piece can easily contain 45 to 50 grams of carbohydrates, the vast majority of which are sugars. Think about it. This is comparable to drinking an entire can of sugary soda, but presented in the form of a healthy fruit. The natural label doesn't negate the metabolic impact of the loading. The problem with mangoes isn't just the amount of sugar, but how they're consumed. People rarely eat a slice. They usually consume the whole thing, often in smoothies or as a dessert after an already carbohydrate-laden meal. When you flood your system with this amount of fructose at once, it forces the liver to work harder. Fructose, unlike glucose, can only be metabolized by the liver, and if the liver already has reserves or is under metabolic stress, which is common in modern humans, that fructose is quickly converted into liver fat. This directly contributes to insulin resistance and increased visceral fat. And this visceral fat, remember, is the command center that actively suppresses your testosterone production through the aromatization mechanism we mentioned earlier. If you love mangoes, the practical recommendation is to reduce your portion to a third and consume them only occasionally and never alone, but rather with fiber or protein to mitigate their glycemic impact. The key message with these three high glycemic fruits, grapes, overripe bananas, and mangoes, isn't that they're poison, but that they're nature's desserts and should be treated as such. If you're struggling with weight, fatigue, and low libido, clear symptoms of low testosterone or insulin resistance, you need to replace these options with fruits that offer a better nutritional glycemic ratio. Speaking of nature's desserts, if high glycemic index fresh fruits already require moderation, imagine what happens when you remove 80% of their water content. This brings us to the next category of foods that, despite often being presented as healthy or energizing for a quick boost of strength, are true silent saboteurs of male hormonal health: dried fruits. Let's think specifically of raisins and, even more critically, dates. The central problem here isn't just that the sugar is present, but that it's ultra-concentrated. To make a small box of raisins, a considerable bunch of grapes is needed. When dried, the volume is drastically reduced, but the sugar content, which is predominantly glucose and fructose, remains intact. When you consume a handful of raisins or 3 dates, what you're doing is introducing a massive and very rapid dose of free sugar into your bloodstream. The fiber that remained in the dried fruit no longer has the cellular matrix structure of fresh fruit. That integrity is lost in the dehydration process. Therefore, this fiber can't provide the resistance necessary for slow, gradual digestion. This results in a much steeper spike in glucose and insulin than you would get from eating the original fresh fruit. A rapid and constant spike in insulin not only leads to long-term insulin resistance, a precursor to type 2 diabetes, but also has a direct and negative impact on testosterone production. When the body is in a constant state of hyperinsulinemia, high insulin levels, it prioritizes energy storage and activates metabolic pathways that are counterintuitive to optimal steroid hormone production. Furthermore, this dysregulated metabolic state can promote the synthesis of sex hormone-binding globulin, SHBG, which, as we know, binds free testosterone, sequestering it, and rendering it unusable for maintaining muscle mass, energy, and libido. And there's a second critical factor with dried fruits that's often overlooked, and it affects the absorption of essential minerals for humans. I'm referring to the concentration of oxalates. By removing water, we not only concentrate the fruit's sugar, but also these natural compounds that act as anti-nutrients. Fruits like raisins, figs, and certain dried berries have a significantly higher oxalate load per gram than their fresh counterparts. These oxalates have a high affinity for binding to essential minerals in the gut, especially calcium, magnesium, and, crucially, zinc. Zinc is critical for over 300 enzymatic reactions, including optimal testosterone production, immune function, and prostate health. If you're relying on dried fruit as a primary source of energy in your daily diet, you're inadvertently creating a silent barrier that hinders the absorption of these pillars of male health, putting your long-term hormone levels at risk. Now, if dried fruit presents a challenge in terms of concentration and absorption speed, let's return to the initial scenario, which is much more aggressive and chemical: canned fruit cocktail. Here, the situation is exponentially worse because we're not just talking about fruit stripped of its matrix and functional fiber, but also the addition of an ingredient designed to be addictive and inflammatory: high fructose corn syrup, HFCS. HFCS is not simply a concentrated version of the fructose found in an apple. It's an industrially processed product with a ratio of fructose to free glucose that the liver processes very differently. When you consume this syrup, the fructose load reaches the liver almost entirely for metabolism. Unlike glucose, which can be used by all the body's cells as fuel, fructose must be processed primarily by the liver. If the liver is already saturated with energy, fructose has no choice but to be converted into fat through a process called de novo lipogenesis. This immediate conversion leads directly to the accumulation of visceral fat and, dangerously, to liver fat, what we know as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. This liver damage is a primary trigger of systemic inflammation, which directly attacks the delicate inner lining of the arteries, the endothelium. And herein lies the direct link with testosterone and cardiovascular health. The inflammation originating in fatty liver not only damages arteries, but also creates a metabolic battlefield where the body gradually becomes deaf to insulin's signal. This insulin resistance is the true silent engine of metabolic syndrome. Think of it this way: if your cells don't respond to insulin's call to absorb glucose, the pancreas, in a desperate attempt to normalize blood sugar, pumps out more and more insulin. This results in chronic hyperinsulinemia. Hyperinsulinemia is catastrophic for hormonal balance. It is a particularly severe blow to testosterone. A chronically elevated insulin level acts directly on the gonads, the testes in men and the ovaries in women, inhibiting the natural production of steroid hormones. But there is a second crucial layer of damage. Elevated insulin promotes the liver's production of sex hormone-binding globulin, SHBG. SHBG is like a molecular taxi that has a tremendous affinity for free testosterone, the biologically active form usable by the body. With more SHBG circulating, this protein hijacks free testosterone, rendering it unusable. Thus, not only is it producing less testosterone due to insulin resistance, but the little it has is being deactivated and bound. This vicious cycle of excessive exposure to processed fructose, fatty liver disease, insulin resistance, and hyperinsulinemia not only leads to the relentless accumulation of visceral fat and a sluggish metabolism, but also accelerates the deterioration of mood and feelings of well-being. Glycemic and hormonal imbalance affects the synthesis of essential neurotransmitters. When the body is metabolically unstable, the production and use of serotonin, our happiness and satiety hormone, is compromised. This creates a feeling of emptiness or anxiety that, ironically, pushes us to seek out the same quick, sugary fuel that started the problem, closing a cycle of dependence and fatigue. But insulin resistance and fructose overload are only part of the damage equation. When we talk about foods like grapes, which have thin skin and are frequently on the list of produce with the most pesticide residues, we introduce a third, silent, and very potent hormonal attack mechanism: xenoestrogens. Xenoestrogens are synthetic chemical compounds that mimic the form and function of our natural estrogen. They are found in many pesticides, herbicides, plastics, and industrial pollutants. Once we ingest these chemical residues, they are very problematic because they act as potent endocrine disruptors. Their molecular structure is similar enough to that of sex hormones to allow them to attach to cell receptors intended for our own hormones. Imagine hormone receptors as locks and hormones as keys. Testosterone has its own specific key, but xenoestrogens act like false master keys. They block the lock without actually opening it or enabling biological function. By occupying these sensitive sites, they prevent the limited free testosterone remaining in circulation, already depleted by SHBG and high insulin, from effectively sending its messages to the body. The result is a state of functional estrogen dominance in men and women. This manifests physically as the stubborn accumulation of fat in the abdominal and flank areas, fluid retention, difficulty building or maintaining muscle, and, crucially for vitality, a dramatic decrease in sexual desire and sexual responsiveness. It's a triple threat: less hormone production by insulin, less usable testosterone by SHBG, and fewer functional receptors due to chemical contamination. The solution, of course, isn't to stop eating fruit, but to be surgically selective about what enters our bodies. We need to establish a robust internal defense. And this defense begins with the purchase. If the fruit you're going to consume has a thin skin and is eaten whole, like strawberries, grapes, or apples, investing in the organic version isn't a luxury, but a necessity to protect your hormonal balance. The rule is simple. If you eat the skin, prioritize organic or learn advanced washing techniques to reduce surface toxic residues. Once we've mitigated the toxic load at the source, we can focus on fruits that act as true metabolic and endocrine allies. These aren't just foods, they're encapsulated functional medicine, designed by nature to help us cleanse the system of environmental toxins and improve receptor sensitivity. I want to particularly highlight the power of berries. I'm thinking of blueberries, raspberries, and blackberries. These jewels of nature are essential for several reasons. First, their glycemic profile is exceptionally low, meaning they don't trigger those insulin spikes we so detest. They keep glucose stable, allowing the liver to focus on its detoxification work instead of dealing with excess sugar. Additionally, berries are rich in phytochemicals like ellagic acid, a compound that has demonstrated an impressive ability to help the liver neutralize harmful estrogens and xenoestrogens, facilitating their safe excretion from the body. By consistently consuming these powerful antioxidants, we not only combat cellular damage, but also activate phase 2 liver cleansing pathways. This clearing the ground action is essential for testosterone, or any other hormone, to function properly. And this is where I want to introduce the second star fruit, which is often underestimated but has a dramatic impact on vitality and circulatory health, the pomegranate. So, let's remember that optimizing our hormonal health isn't a matter of magic supplements, but rather a functional strategy. It's about giving the liver the necessary tools, like the powerful phytochemicals in berries and pomegranate, so it can efficiently dismantle and eliminate those xenoestrogens that sabotage our system. We've seen that nutrition is our first line of defense in medicine. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What liver cleansing strategy based on these functional foods will you implement first in your routine? Let me know in the comments. If this information has been valuable, please subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell so you don't miss our next analysis, and share this knowledge with anyone struggling to balance their hormones. I greatly appreciate your time and trust. With love and science, I bid you farewell until next time. Your Dr. Elena Castillo.